consumer and then it's marketed in a completely different manner. So what else do you need to look at? Well, you need to do competitive analysis. You need to look at what the marketplace looks like, what it looks like now, and what it might look like in the future. And you're probably saying, well, how are you going to know what the marketplace looks like in the future? Well, a really good way to read that is to look at games that have already come out, look at features in those games that perhaps weren't as polished as they could be, but reviewers or focus groups or people on forums are talking about that aspect as one of their favorite features. And it's a really good place to glean and build upon. And you see that kind of thread moving through games as the industry trends forward. So you've done your research, you've worked out what the pillars are, you know the target audience that you want to sell the product to, and you also have a good understanding of the marketplace, right? So you've got your playing field, American football or football, whatever it's called here. Sorry, I'm English. You know basically the broad outline of where you want to go. And it's basically an agreement, I suppose, that you have with the stakeholder and the team members have, that you're not going to basically exceed or go outside of that region, because arguably that can be seen as wastage. So what's the next step? The Imagineer, coined by Disney. So what are we talking about here? We're basically talking about the conception of the idea within the playing field. And this is something that I really like, and I don't know where it came from, or maybe I dreamt about it or something. But traditionally, when I'd concept at Codemasters or at Acclaim or Sony and that kind of thing, we'd just kind of blue sky stuff. We'd look at our pillars and we'd go, well, what can we fit into this? So the kind of model with this is that it's kind of, you put yourself in the position of a gamer, or you put yourself in the position of the consumer, and you basically say to yourself, I wish I could be an F-15 fighter pilot. I wish I could drive a Ferrari. Now you guys are thinking, wow, but they've already done that, so what's the benefit of that? Well, the interesting side effect of using this kind of concepting is that it tends to create a certain amount of innovation as well, because if you wish you could do something and it's already out there, then what are you delivering to the consumer that's any different? And then you can flag those as small little eyes or big eyes, which is basically little innovations, big innovations. But it allows you to really get to the roots of what does the consumer want, what's going to blow them away, what's going to exceed their expectations. So secondarily, I've worked, like you know, in quite a few companies, like I said, some good and some bad. Some good design teams, some bad design teams, and the bad design teams that I've worked with tend to silo, and for those that don't know what that means that they tend to just stick together with their clique and work out what they think's best, and essentially design a game that they would want to play themselves, which is sometimes works, and more than not, it doesn't work. So the old adage of cast a wider net and you get more fish kind of works with this idea. And the basis for this is that a lot of great ideas come from different experiences that people have had in their lives. So the more people you poll, when you're basically talking about developing something within the playing field that you've already decided upon, the chances are you're going to get much more useful information and much more useful ideas, which you can then siphon down at a later date, which we'll see in the next slide. So focus test frequently. So even at this stage, when you're concepting, I'm not suggesting that we go out and we get focus testers and we bring them into the studio and we start talking about conceptual ideas. What I mean by focus testing is we talk to the people in the studio, we talk to the stakeholders, we find someone in our target audience and say, do you think we're deviating from the path already? Is this already basically breaking expectations? And then finally, and this is really, really important, and again, this is kind of very black and white and it will come across as very stale, but in actuality, it's really, really useful. So we know that we're making a compelling product for the customer, so that's kind of our primary objective. But what's compelling about the product for the stakeholder? What are we doing with the product that's going to make them go, holy whatever, we've got to green light this, we've got to make this game? Above and beyond the basic idea already sounding good, which moves us into the salesman phase. And again, this could be anyone on the team. More often than not, it'll be a lead designer, for example, in a green light meeting. So the salesman, right from the outset, you've got to believe in your ideas. There's no point going into a green light meeting with execs and that kind of thing. As soon as they see that perhaps you don't understand what you're talking about properly, or that you're winging it, you've pretty much lost the battle. Basically, the adage with the world is once people thought it was flat, and then some people said it was round, and it's round. So I'm sorry to put that up there, the X Factor thing. I mean, maybe some of you watch it, I don't, my wife does. Devastating. Anyway, the whole thing about X Factor is the fact that they basically boil and boil and boil and boil something down until when you turn on the TV, after like a millisecond of looking at that person, you're like, oh God, before she even opens her mouth, I know what she's going to do. So the reason this is important, and this is something I struggled with, I would say, halfway through my design experience of this whole, oh God, design's so corporate, why does it have to be like this? Well, the fact of the matter is that you guys in the team already have aeons more information about the products you're going to make. And the people that you're selling this to, essentially the stakeholders, are thinking like the customer. And also, they don't have as much information as the customer does. So if you're not going to deliver a strong and saleable pitch, they're going to think that the customer's not going to understand what you're making, and that's going to scare them. It's going to look like a risky product. So really come up with a strong and saleable pitch, and whether that's you use the X, like basically a one-liner that sounds really cool, or whichever way you do it, sharp and snappy, basically. This one's really important as well, and again, I suppose a little bit of this comes down to politics. It depends how hard you find games to greenlight within your company. And essentially, what you're doing is, you're not going into the greenlight room, or you're not discussing the game with the stakeholders and making it look like a closed box. You're going in there with a concept, and they're saying, hey, how about this? Or hey, how about that? And you're like, no, I know what I'm doing. It's going to sell millions. Back off. That's not going to work. And the main reason is it's a psychological problem. Humans like to feel empowerment, and they feel empowerment through basically working together on the same things. And it's also beneficial to get their information back. And if you basically you get greenlit, and you've already had this disconnect with the stakeholder, then you're beginning to build development debt, because there will be a time later on during the project that they will turn around and go, what is this? What are you making? So it's very important to have them with you all the way through the product. So my friendly second-hand car salesman, I've been in a lot of greenlight meetings where promises have been made that are clearly unrealistic, and they just get called out. Generally, people in greenlight meetings spending millions of dollars know where the bad smell is, and they hit it straight away. But there's a more important reason for being honest, and this is perhaps one of the most fundamental problems with game development nowadays, is that you'll have a group go in to basically pitch a game knowing that that's going to be 2 years worth of security if the game gets greenlit, or 1 year's worth of security. So what happens if you go in there and you're worried that you're not going to get that 2 years, and so you overpromise? You say, oh yes, we'll be able to get this done on this date. Oh yes, basically we'll have all these extra features and so on. And what you're doing there is you're just building up tons and tons and tons of development debt. So before you've even started producing the game, before any money's really been spent on the production, you're already over budget and you're behind schedule. And that really only surfaces later on when people go, oh yeah, the extra feature, we need to do that, and you're just about to master. So we moved into production. We did all of those things correctly. And we're going to make a game. So the role for the designer or the team at this stage, to my mind, is the Nexus. And that's basically the conduit of information coming backwards and forwards. You've got the concept. You've gone through the greenlight meeting. You're like, yes, stakeholders believe in it. We're golden. We just go and develop what we want now. That's great. We know the direction that we're going in. But right from this stage and throughout the rest of the project, just because you've been greenlit on those ideas doesn't mean that you can't allow the concept to be developed. And if you do want to develop the concept, and if you do want to branch it slightly, then just make sure the stakeholders are involved. And it's also very important to maintain the vision of what you're selling. So for example, if you've got some chairs and tables and that's what the customer wants, and you start deviating too much already, and you haven't polled the stakeholders and so on, at the end you might turn up with something like that, which I don't think anyone really wants. I just had to put that image in because every day from my desk, from my office, I could see that monstrosity outside the library, and I don't know, maybe I've got an attachment with it now or something.